Well, if you're thinking about just what the brain can do, I like using just crazy, gnarly examples. I used to work in an Alzheimer's clinic when I was trying to get into medical school. And once in a while, these older folks, they would have dementia. Parts of the brains would literally wither, like the flesh would wither. It's not just the thinking and the electricity.
Right.
And hidden painting abilities would come out. Anything difficult where you have to think is good for your brain. If you ask Usain Bolt, how do I get stronger legs? Run. It's intuitive. But the flesh in our skulls, it's meant to think and feel. And that is the power of self-growth. And it's a thinking machine. It's a thinking flesh that you actually have to use or to protect itself, because it's an energy hog, right? It's 3 pounds, but uses 20%. If you're not using parts of it, it'll program itself to let those parts of the garden wither. So the diversity of thinking and the depth of thinking, just one level past what you're used to, is the way to keep the whole garden flourishing. And it is a garden in there. There's chemicals, there are things moving, there are different types of brain cells. It's not just neurons. So I always try to give that metaphor analogy, if you will, that it's a garden and you have to irrigate it and stimulate and tend to all the corners, particularly the ones you're starting to neglect. Maybe it's your left hand. Getting out of the box and engaging the recesses of your mind is the most important thing. And then you have the creative things happen. You don't just sit down and have them happen. You got to work and dream and go hard. And on top of that, something creative can happen.
So is there a specific protocol? Like, I know people have said, brush your teeth with your left hand, or one of the coolest things I've ever heard about staving off dementia is to take dance class, because having to do bodily movements, but in a particular rhythm and learning new steps is like sort of the ultimate trifecta for keeping the brain young.
Absolutely. The minute you don't use your left hand, the right parietal lobe with the motor strip says, I'm not going to use much. I'll shave down that density of those brain cells a little bit. So that's where movement's important. So simple things like getting the mouse, using the mouse with your left hand and using your phone with your left hand. It's a powerful technique. And then the other thing is navigation. When you see old people and they lose their way home, well, that has a particular address also. Many things are global in the brain, but navigation is in the temporal lobe, and they have dementia in that area. Navigation also is spatial awareness is a function of the brain, and sometimes when we're on our phones too much, we don't have that. So my kids, I tell them, don't look down, not religiously or adamantly, but try to just remember our route and just look up and see how far you can get. I think those habits will help us as we get less young. And those are practical things we can do during the day. Brain training, it doesn't have to be some weird game that's not intuitive. I think brain training just means learning as a habit, one step past where you're comfortable. If you're reading it, you know it, your brain's it's an idle. If it's too hard, it's not even engaged. I'm not even going to win this race. I'm not going to kick in a second gear. So just like video games, just good enough to get to the next level, right? They don't hit you with the 5th level, the tilt level up front. It's level 1 to level 2 to level 3. That's what learning is. So despite your knowledge and intellect, it's just that level right beyond you that is brain training. So you don't have to buy an app. You just have to challenge yourself and think. Sleep is a tricky one. I spent a decade without sleep. Go in Monday morning at 4 or 5 a.m., come home Tuesday at 7 p.m. And what you realize during that time is, even if you can get a few hours of sleep, don't do it. If you could just get an hour or two, sometimes it's better to stay up the whole night. And it's a story well worn between residents. They pass that on to each other. And the reason is the sleep disruption can be quite difficult on the brain. And so if you're going to get 5 good hours of sleep, going on to people who aren't in surgical training, maybe that's better than 7 hours of disrupted sleep where your phone is going off and different things are pinging your way. So that's one lesson I think people should understand. So this is not to lose weight. It's what nutrients to put inside you, where if you have 1,000 people here and you have 1,000 people here, and for 20 years they eat differently, what are the numbers of people with dementia, all of the things being equal? It essentially says, it doesn't have to be Mediterranean. It just has to be plants, like as I tell my kids, plants, which is, fruit or salad. It doesn't have to be just salad. Yogurt, nuts, lean meats like, chicken and salmon, a nutritional component in food that is good for brain health. And the omega-3s are a unique type of fat that are the brain is an extremely fatty organ. And so it needs to have those fats. So omega-3s are the only things nutritionally that I would say is you could supplement or actually add salmon in a couple times a week. So that's the mind diet twist on the heart diet by adding a little bit more emphasis on salmon. What you can't have is a lot of fried processed food. And if you have a cheat day or whatever, you have a burger, it doesn't negate what you've done. I think that's the hardest thing about dieting for people. They feel like the shift has to be complete and religious. And to me, it's more glacial because the benefits will also take decades to accrue. Those are the nutrients that are best for the brain. What if you wanted to work on focus and cognition? These things are harder to test, but when you go into the big neuroscience journals, they speak about intermittent fasting. And the best way I can explain it is your brain's a hybrid vehicle. It evolved through thousands and thousands and thousands of years of lots of food scarcity. You didn't eat all the time. And so it's got a backup mechanism called ketones. So after 16 hours, if you don't put glucose in and the liver's done releasing the glucose it's held onto through glycogen reserves, then it'll start burning fat. They'll clip off those oxygens and hydrogens and they'll make ketones out of it. Intermittent fasting can also help you lose weight. I think that's why most people are interested in it. But it's the way the brain prefers to get its fuel source. And it's based on a diet. Lessons about dieting learned through controlling epilepsy and seizures in kids in areas where there's no medicine. So I was in Ukraine when they don't have medicine or a type of seizure. Seizure is the abnormal electrical activity of the brain, just like an arrhythmia would be an abnormal electrical activity of the heart. We would just feed them all fat diet. You could smell it in the hospital. There's something about an all fat diet forcing you into just using ketones. Now, intermittent fasting is back and forth, glucose and then ketones, glucose and then ketones. But for kids, if you just get them almost nearly all ketone as the source that goes up to the brain through an all-fat diet, their seizure rates go down. So that's proof that food changes mind, because the mind is the electricity sparking through that flesh. Food will change the electricity, detectable, measurable electricity in your brain. Food affects mind, food affects brain. With that premise, we can talk about, okay, mind diet will hold off dementia, and intermittent fasting might make you feel like you've had a cup of coffee once you get in a rhythm on it. It's not going to make you smarter, but it'll bring you to your most focused, to bring you to your most attentive. It's not going, I'm intermittent fasting and now I can do physics. It's not like that. It's your personal best. And then the habits you demonstrate to your family by trying to be at your personal best. And then your kids see that and your friends see that. And I think that's how you impact generation change, is to have capable people demonstrate, hey, it's not hard, and this is the best we can do for ourselves.